All right, welcome back. Today I want to talk about the new normal and maintenance, when the science of maintenance and understanding maintenance, because we talk a lot about change and growth, right? Everything that we're doing here is about growing, it's about becoming better, it's about creating some type of change, creating behavior change, creating some new place in your life. But at a certain point, one would assume that we get to just maintain that thing, right? The whole point of all of the stuff that we're doing here is that eventually we get to just have it, right? I want to work on my body for a while, but then I want to just be healthy. I want to work on my habits for a while, but then I want to have the thing, right? So the goal implicitly, whether stated or not, is usually that we work on something for a while and then we get to maintain it. But as most people who have done things like this will find, that it's not as easy to maintain things as they thought it was, right? We think like, okay, I'll work for 6 months or 3 months or 6 weeks or 6 years, whatever it is, but then I'll be good and I'll have it. And that, for better or worse, tends not to be the case. So today I wanted to break down what exactly is the struggle with maintenance and how to understand it better, because as we know, understanding is the first step to being able to go through this stuff. This might help. So the very first thing we always have to understand is the brain. And the brain, the human brain, any animal brain in general, cares about one thing, and that's survival. Just survive somehow. That is the number one rule that our brain is operating under at any given time. And because of that, it's always looking out for danger. It is always looking out for anything that could get in the way of our survival. Every morning when I wake up, my brain wants me to get to live long enough to put my head back on the pillow that night so that I can sleep and do it all over again. And that's why fear is such a powerful motivator to us, because anything that anything that represents a threat to our survival is inherently going to cause fear. That's why negative things are so salient in our brain, right? That's why we remember things that happen negatively so powerfully, right? We remember getting turned down for a date, or we remember all the bad things we did. We remember that stupid comment that we made, or that when we slipped in the middle of the store and everyone saw us. Every negative thing stands out so powerfully in our brain, because anything negative pings on that part of our brain that goes, okay, I need to survive. And then we talk about habits, right? And part of survival, right? Our brain's number one imperative is survival. And a big part of that, yes, we talk about fear, and we can talk about things that are actually threatening towards us, right? A predator, a dangerous situation. But a big part of survival is energy, and having enough energy to survive, right? So our brain is always monitoring how much energy we have. And it always is going to conserve energy, because in case of times of emergency, it wants to make sure we have enough energy. And this is why, we tend to be quote unquote lazy, or tend to want to rest a lot, and tend to want to eat more caloric foods, because these things all conserve energy. And that makes perfect sense. But this also is why habits are so powerful, because a habit, as you can see here, is a recurring unconscious behavior that is acquired through frequent repetition. Basically, what a habit is doing, it's taking something that we do over and over through frequent repetition, and our brain is basically understanding that, okay, I'm doing this thing over and over, rather than using conscious energy and conscious effort on this every time. I'm just going to make this an unconscious habit, right? Because having something consciously in our mind, thinking about it, we have infinite things happening to us all the time, but only so much can be in our conscious forefront of our mind. Right now, I'm talking to you, but I'm also sitting, I'm breathing, I'm moving. There's a lot of stuff is happening subconsciously. Consciously, I'm looking at the camera and I'm speaking. And that's the thing that's most energy expensive to me right now. And our brain is extremely energy expensive. The majority of the calories that we burn each day are actually burned through our brain, right? So our brain is a tiny little organ. The whole rest of our body burns about as much calories each day as our brain burns. So understand that our brain wants to habituate things. It wants to make things unconscious, so it doesn't have to think about them so much. But that unconscious behavior is acquired through frequent repetition, and that is a lot of upfront effort. So that's the part that we're at right now, right? We're doing something consciously with the idea, the hope that it becomes subconsciously habituated and that we can enter that maintenance phase, right? So there's a bit of a trade-off. I have to do things consciously in the beginning with the understanding, the hope that eventually it becomes subconscious. But we have to understand that on top of always wanting to survive, always wanting to maintain energy, our brain and our body are always looking for what's called homeostasis. And homeostasis is simply a state of equilibrium, a state of balance, okay? And everything in our life, in our body, is being balanced at any given time. And stress is simply anything that takes us out of that balance. So understand that for what we're talking about right now, stress is not inherently a negative thing. People think about stress in a negative way, like, oh, I'm so stressed, but we can have good stress and bad stress. You can see here on the screen, eustress, EUSTRESS, is what's known as bad stress, is good stress, sorry, and distress is bad stress. And it doesn't matter what type of stress it is. Anything that removes us from this balance is stress. So you can think about it like, if I'm hungry, that's a stress. And then I eat to then relieve that hunger, and that brings me back to homeostasis. If I eat too much, then I've gone over, now I'm overly full, but then my body digests, and that brings me back to homeostasis, right? If I miss a bunch of sleep one night, I could, then I've tipped the scales in one way and I'm out of homeostasis. I could get extra sleep to bring me back into homeostasis. So our brain and our body are always looking for a state of balance, a state of equilibrium. We must exist in this state at all times. And that's why any stress that feels like something that would compromise our survival inherently puts this out of whack, and that becomes the top priority for our brain. So anything that, that causes fear, anything that causes an overload of physical stress where our brain goes, okay, I might not be able to survive this, inherently puts us out of homeostasis and inherently puts us in a place of like a high alarm, high state. So the way our nervous system works, you see on the right, the central nervous system, that's your brain and your spinal cord. What we're more concerned with is on the left, the peripheral nervous system, and that's everything else, right? That's your arms, that's the gestures I'm making, that's also my organs and things like that. But if we slide down to the bottom, we see in the red, parasympathetic, rest and digest, or sympathetic, fight or flight. We probably have heard these terms before. But what we need to understand is that fight or flight is that alarm state where my brain thinks that I am in danger of not surviving, right? There's a stress on the system that has taken me out of equilibrium in some way, but that is a negative stress that has now put, at least in my brain, the thought that survival has been jeopardized. This could be physical stress, like I'm running and I can't keep up and I'm breathing super hard. This could be my boss yelling at me. This could be an argument I got in with my significant other. This could be a car almost sideswiped me when I was driving home. This could be just me getting mad at myself for messing up something at work, or just for, not doing the things on my to-do list. It doesn't really matter. Anything that puts me in a stressed position where my brain takes this alarm and puts me into fight or flight mode inherently wipes out the rest of this whole side of the equation, right? So everything in my peripheral nervous system goes out of whack once I'm in sympathetic fight or flight mode. If I'm in parasympathetic mode, which means I'm balanced, I'm in homeostasis, my brain can now focus on the things that it needs to, being rest and digest. That's recovery, that's resting, that's positive. And if it's there, then all the other things, my autonomic nervous system, my skeletal muscles, all that stuff can work in the correct way. So that's why it's so important when we talk about rest and relaxation and understanding the stress response to stay in a balanced state, and why we need to know how to get out of that fight or flight response when we're getting super amped up, when we're getting that super clenchy and stressy in that place. So this is what's known as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's famous. Some people will go against it, whatever. But the point is, what I want to show you here is that at the very bottom, we have physiological, right? So that's breathing, food, the things you need to do to stay alive, right? It's the most important thing, or any organism will fight for that thing to its last breath, literally. Right above that, we have safety, right? And that is the most important need that we have once we can breathe and eat, the most important thing that we need is safety. And that's safety in the term of like a home, a shelter, but it's also safety in the term of feeling, right? Going back to the first slide, our brain is always worried about survival. And when we're off balance here and we have an overt amount of stress that has taken us out of homeostasis, it doesn't matter, again, if it's truly something that is threatening our safety. Like I said, your boss yelling at you, or you missing a deadline for a project that you're doing, or oversleeping on your alarm and starting the day 2 hours later and missing your train. These are not things that threaten your actual physical safety. You're not literally going to die, but your brain translates it into that. To your brain, this is the exact same thing as you being in a burning building, and it will throw everything else out the window that it cares about, or that it normally would care about, because right now all it cares about is your safety and getting you back to this state of balance. So now coming back to where I started here today, why this is so important, finding maintenance, right? Because the goal is, as we said, we're fighting for change, we're creating change, we're trying to grow, but eventually I want to get to a place where I can just maintain, where I can just be that person. But we have to understand that in times of stress, the brain will always resort back to what it is easiest. Easiest meaning least energy expensive, right? Expending energy is a threat to our brain, and when we're in, especially when we're in a stress response scenario, because we need energy to survive. So I don't want to waste any energy. So that's why when we are overly stressed, when we are in a state of like we have a lot going on, right? A lot of these habits that we've built over time can get thrown out the window, right? People tell me all the time, they're like, oh, I was doing so well. I was meal prepping and I was, exercising and I was doing my morning routine. But then, I had an extra thing, an extra project came on at work, and it was the holiday season and I had to go shopping for everyone. And I was just super stressed out and I just couldn't keep up with it. That's how it works, right? When you are in a balanced homeostasis place, when you're in a balanced place where all your stress levels and your inputs and outputs are balanced and you're feeling good, and that's when you're able to maintain habits, because your brain goes, okay, like this thing is important enough for me to delegate to to my subconscious thinking, and it will make sure that you drink your water, do whatever the thing is that you've trained it to do. But once you are in a overly stressed place, you're in that fight or flight response, your heart rate is elevated, you're anxious, your brain is going a mile a minute, it's going to throw all of that stuff right out the window. And that's why it becomes so frustrating, because it's like, I work so hard to create this new normal, but then as soon as I hit the first little roadblock or speed bump, it's like I lost it all. But that's how our brain works. To your brain, this is a safety mechanism. It's going, of course, why would I worry about stupid little habits when your safety is the thing that I'm worried about? So understand that your brain is trying to protect you. This thing is how we've survived tens of thousands, hundreds of millions, however many years on this planet from evolution, and gotten to where we are, is because our brain prioritizes safety over and above all else, right? But now we have to understand that in reality, most of the things that create a stress response, especially a distress response, meaning a negative stress response, are not truly threatening our actual safety, right? Like I said, your boss yelling at you, missing a work deadline, going over on your calories, missing a workout. These things that stress us out are not actually threatening our safety. So how do we make sure that when we are in a stress response state, when our brain doesn't care about the habits that we work so hard to build, how can we make sure that we don't lose out on all the progress that we get, so that we can then maintain more? And right here, I have a great quote from James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And that is it right there. We have to have plans in place for when these things get hard. We have to have systems in place for when I'm overly stressed, right? So if I'm if I'm meal prepping and making my meals for Monday through Friday lunch every Sunday, and that's part of my system and part of my routine, and that's what gets me to my goal for whatever the goal is. I need to have a plan for what happens when I have a thing that weekend and I can't make when I'm going away for my family's, daughter, my family's sister's quinceanera or something like that, or for when I have a wedding to attend, or for when my kid gets sick on Sunday morning, and usually that's when I go out and go grocery shopping, or for when I'm just overly stressed and that becomes the thing that gets kicked off my conscious mind. So understand that everything that we work for, right? Your brain will always knock all of this stuff out if it is not 100% completely necessary. It is always going to take the path of least resistance. It does not care that this is important to you if it is not important for your immediate survival, right? So a really easy example like this of this is the gym, working out, right? In times of stress, the brain will always resort back to what is easiest and least energy expensive. I worked at a gym for many, many, many years. And one thing I understand and learn is that everyone has bad form. Most people, 99 out of 100, I would say, have bad form when they exercise in the gym. But now they don't do that on purpose, right? No one goes into the gym and says, oh, I just want to have the worst form. They might even think that they're doing things with good form, but your brain doesn't care about good form. What your brain cares about is saving energy, right? So doing something in the gym to get the maximum benefit is actually more energy expensive, right? I want to tax my muscles more. I want to actually make it harder for my muscles and make it more challenging. So that's going to in direct opposition to what my brain wants, which is to save energy and make things easier for me. So my brain will subconsciously cheat for me. You'll do things like you see this guy in the picture where he's leaning back in a bicep curl. Instead of using his bicep, he's using his back, because my brain goes, okay, if the goal is to get the weight up to my shoulders, I can just lean back and use my hips and my back and a bunch of other muscles and get the weight up there, because that's much easier for my body than doing it the way that however it's supposed to do. Now understand that my muscles, my bicep, the muscle that I'm trying to train, is getting much less benefit there. I'm also putting my back in a precarious situation. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. But the point is, to my brain, it thinks that it's helping me. It thinks like, okay, yeah, you want to get that weight up. I'll help you get that weight up, and I'll just do it in a much easier way. I'll use all these other muscles. I'll use my spine. I'll use all this other stuff, and we'll get it up there. Like we're a team, dude. Like it thinks that it's doing everything for me. And if I don't know better, if I don't realize this is happening, I can't stop it. And it goes directly against what my brain wants, which is to save energy, right? So I'm asking myself to expend more energy. My brain will never do this by itself, right? It will never choose to expend more energy than less energy. It's just, that is not how the brain works. So if I'm waiting for this to happen automatically, it's never actually going to happen. So it's the same thing. If I want some of these things to become easier, where if it's something that is always going to be a challenging thing, it can become easier, but it cannot just become something that just happens automatically, because it goes against my brain's number one thing, which is conserve energy and survive, right? So I always have to be checking myself and realizing that my brain will take me back to the path of least resistance all the time. It will always do what's easiest, not what's best for me. And that's why I need to have systems in place so that when I am not thinking about this stuff, or so when it gets too hard, I know what to do in those times. So the thing that I need you to remember, right? The key takeaways here is your brain only cares about survival. That is it. So it's just survive. It does not care about how you look. It does not care about how you feel. It does not care about what you want, your goals, your hopes, your dreams. It cares about survival. Everything that your brain does passes through that one filter. Is this going to help me survive? Is this going to conserve energy? Is this going to make me better at survival? So anything that you do that's counter to that, something like going out and running or dieting or something like that, which is actually energy expensive, is fighting against that. So you're inherently fighting against your own internal brain stuff. I don't know how to say it, but this search is a search for homeostasis. It's a constant search for balance, and it's always checking. Your brain is always checking. Am I good now? Am I good now? Am I off balance? Is the stress gone? Am I too stressed? Is the stress gone away? Is this good stress? Is it bad stress? And remember, stress is anything that takes us out of homeostasis. It can be negative or positive, right? A workout is a positive stress, but it's still a stress, right? Me working on my business for 2 hours could be positive or negative, but it's still a stress, right? So as we're going through these things, if the things that we do over and over and over, our brain will theoretically start to habituate some of them. It will create habits to conserve energy, but habits will always be secondary to safety needs, right? Meaning I can have the habit of, exercising, or the habit of reading before bed, or the habit of whatever the thing is. But once I am in a state of distress and my homeostasis is off balance, whatever those extra habits are that my brain does not deem as 100% exactly necessary are going to go right out the window. And I'm only going to focus on returning to that balance of homeostasis. And that's why we have to have, for those times where the system is stressed, my habits now get thrown out the window, and all my brain is focused on is returning to this balance. I need to have systems in place so that I can still maintain, because I know that my goal did not just go out the window. Even though my brain threw my habit out the window, my goal did not go out the window, right? I still want the thing. I still want the achievement, whatever it is that I'm working towards. Again, it doesn't matter what the thing is. So you need to have systems and plans in place for when this happens. That's how we maintain, because again, there is no actual maintenance. This is I talk about balance, right? The balance of homeostasis. Understand that it's balancing, right? It does not just get balanced. It's a constant search. You're off balance and returning to balance. You're off balance, you're returning to balance. The same thing with maintenance. You don't actually get to just maintain. You don't just get to go, boom, lock it in, I'm good forever. What happens is you get there and then you get thrown off balance, and then you get yourself back to it. And then you go this way and you bring yourself back to it. But it's a constant battle and back and forth and tug of war. And this can be frustrating, but this is a literal fact of change and growth. And no matter what, this is how it is. So it's something that we need to accept and move forward with so that we can best prepare for when these times do happen. Because again, I say all the time, it's not a question of if this is going to happen, it's a question of when. So remember that your brain only cares about survival. It is always looking for homeostasis and balance. Whenever it is off balance, whenever any stress event happens that takes us away from safety to our brain, it's going to throw away anything that isn't deemed exactly 100% necessary. So anything that you feel you've habituated, anything that you feel pretty confident in, when a time of stress comes, it's going to get thrown out the window. So you need plans in place to make sure that you know how to make things easier for those times. Because in a stress time, you don't want to add more to your plate. You want to take things off your plate. So it's like, how can I work through this in the easiest way to pass through this stress time so that I don't lose my progress, I don't backslide, but I'm still able to reduce my stress and come back to homeostasis. And if you can do that, you'll be able to keep cycling, keep balancing, keep maintaining long enough to make real concerned progress. And that's how you win the game. All right. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I'll get at you next week.